Brock, and I am the Operations Director for GRACE, the Global Resource for Advancing Cancer Education. And we're going to talk today with Jared Bigman and talk about his journey with clinical trials and his cancer diagnosis. Jared, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jared Bigman. I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma back in September of 2012.
So in your choices and trying to find the right treatment and clinical trials are the ones, so when you found your clinical trial, how did you find it? Was your physician the one who put that out there for you, or is it something you found on your own?
So the physician who was treating me, the oncologist, I had failed a few immunotherapy treatments, and he suggested me that I consider a stem cell transplant. And when I went for that evaluation to learn more about that, it was at an NCI designated cancer center that I thought did clinical trials. And I really declined the transplant. It was so invasive. It had long-term hospital stay, long-term recovery, some risks that were very serious. And I just said, I'm not really interested in that right now. So I asked them if there were other options, including clinical trials. And they said, sure, you can get a referral and go see, this specialist who is one of the leading lymphoma experts in the world. And so I learned that she was very highly regarded. She took on my case. I met with her. She took out a very thorough history. She asked a lot of questions, and then she came back and had 4 studies for me to review. And she said, you're eligible for all 4 of these. Here's the layout. Here's what to expect in terms of the treatment schedule. Here's what you could consider side effects that are potential. And she laid out which ones she preferred and why. And so, it was a fair process, and I'm glad that I asked if that was an option for me and pursued that.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And the clinical trials that you found, were they specifically for the AYA community, or were your clinical trials that were out there really for an adult community, or was there any difference there?
Specific for adult patients.
It sounds like you feel like you had a lot of resources available to you, and I think that's sometimes not the same for especially the AYA community. So I think that you have a lot to share because of that. Let's talk about things like scheduling conflicts and the differences, since you were working a full-time job, you're young, and you were entering into a clinical trial. I know you and I had talked previously a little bit about this, and that this is actually a problem for someone who's working full-time. Why don't we talk a little bit about that? Scheduling conflicts and getting your treatment.
Yeah, it's honestly come up a lot over time of just, when you start a new clinical trial, my experience has been that they want extensive lab work very frequently. They want imaging done, at least one type. They want some type of biopsy so they understand what type of tumor burden they have and what it looks like. And then, it is one thing after another, and trying to get all of that scheduled, hopefully on the same day, if not 2 days at the most, driving back and forth between wherever you need to go, hoping it's somewhat local. I live in a major metropolitan area, so I have at least 3 or 4 NCI designated cancer centers within an hour to an hour and a half drive. And I'm pretty fortunate in that. I think if it was a 4-hour drive or an 8-hour drive, getting all of this done would be so hard. And for me, I can work remotely now for the most part. And so if I have a long wait time in between my CT scan and my biopsy, I can get some work done, or I can make phone calls. And so that's been easy. But it can be extremely hard and challenging to balance all of that. I actually prefer to drive myself and take myself to all these appointments. I think that can be unusual for most patients I see. I don't think it's as unusual for AYA patients. I think I'm a very independent person, even aside from all of this I've been through, and I don't mind driving alone. I don't mind waiting alone. I think my wife has come with me a few times. Even her parents have met me there a few times, and my parents a long time ago used to come with me to a lot of appointments, and it kind of raises my anxiety when other people are frustrated about a wait time or wondering why a scan is taking so long, or that there's not enough chairs to sit. Like, it's just like there's always something to be upset about. And for me, if I could just if I'm going to be there all day, which I usually am, I'll make the best of it on my own, and I really don't mind, and I'll try and make the best of it.
It sounds like independent and informed is kind of how you see yourself and how you went forward with this, which is great. Do you think your generation is accepting of these standards of care and the clinical trials? Do you think your mindset was different when you were younger, and how you accepted the treatment that was coming towards you than if you had been older at the time of diagnosis?
I think my initial treatment was so fast, just since diagnosis, evaluating treatment options, and starting treatment all happened within several weeks. Like, I didn't have time to really freak out too much, I guess. And I just dealt with it as it came. And I think that, when it comes to being informed and doing my own research, I think, I didn't pursue a lot of treatments that were outside of what the doctors I've worked with had prescribed. And that is something that I think some people are more aggressive about, is looking things up on the internet or evaluating other opportunities, traveling extensively, talking to many, many different doctors. That wasn't something I looked at, and haven't looked at still. So I think maybe at this point, I've done 4 clinical trials, and I have had many baseline treatments in addition to that I've taken, I've had remission, and then I've relapsed. And I usually tolerate nearly every treatment I've done very well, fortunately. And I do think that's because of my age. I've been told that before by nurses and doctors. And so I think I haven't felt like the options have been exhausted. And maybe if that was the point I was at, where I didn't feel like there was anything left from what I was presented, both standard of care or clinical trials, I think at that point I would probably do more of my own research.
Do you feel like that's that typically for the AYA population, there's more willingness to do your own research and move forward through the process that way?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk now about what you think could be done better. If you could provide feedback for the drug companies or cancer centers when it comes to AYA population, what would you say? We talked about the access to clinical trials, things like that, but how do you think they could do better when it comes to things like more access to clinical trials?
Yeah, I think that I've been fortunate that my oncologist I work with at the cancer center has been extremely accessible, and that when I have questions about my clinical trial, whether when do I have to come back in, or this is a side effect I'm experiencing at home, what can I do? When do I go to the hospital if something happens? She is always a text message or phone call away. I was sending her messages at one point through the messaging portal, and like I wasn't hearing anything, and I was very frustrated. I was sending her emails, I wasn't hearing anything, and then she made it very easy, which was wonderful. So I really appreciated that access to her personally about how to handle the trials I was on and to ask questions about the protocol as well. Um, I think that for AYA populations, especially, that the number of visits required for a study to actually receive treatment or to be inpatient or to be followed along, it can be a lot. Um, I have a study that I finished over a year ago, and I have to go in and I have to get lab work done, a CT with contrast, a PET scan, a doctor's examination, um, and then I have to fill out a quality of life survey. And the one I did just now was on paper, and it's like the research nurse has to fax it and Xerox copies of it, and I'm just like, I've done some of them that are on iPads or other technology, and it just kind of blows my mind that like they don't care about the environment, they don't care about patients' time. So the nurse has to come track me down somewhere in the hallway outside the exam room and get it all done. And it's just like, it is a whole day. It's a very long process. I mean, I got there before 7 a.m. and I didn't leave the campus until after 2.
Mhm.
That's a work day. So I had my laptop, I was making phone calls, but it's definitely tough. And so I think that if there's any way to mitigate what some of that data that's required, either less often or less of it in some way, that would be really helpful. Maybe if it was able to come from, uh, my primary care doctor's office, which is a lot closer to my home than the cancer center, that could be another way that we could make this a little bit easier, and better for people like me that have families, that have jobs, that
Right.
it is tougher, rather than some patients maybe in their 60s or 70s that had been retired, and that going to the hospital was a nice event for them to get out of the house. Not that it's that nice, but I think that, I don't know. I don't hate it, but I think that there is a lot that could be done to improve efficiency, to make things easier, and to cause less stress. And I think that that's, another way to really think about how can clinical trials be structured in a way that understands that AYA populations want to be there less. And
Do you feel like there's a definite split between the treatment you get for your clinical trial and the treatment you receive at your regular doctor? Like, do they, um, if they could coordinate care a little better, do you think more could be done at your local facility?
yeah, I think so. What I have understood is that they only want that the study sponsor says all lab work has to be collected at this place.
Mhm.
All of the PET scans have to come from this machine. And it's just very, I guess they want the data consistent. Like I took fifth grade science class, and it was like, if you can eliminate however many variables you have, your data is better quality. That's probably part of it, because if I go to this place and somebody else goes to this place, and then it's there's
Mhm.
more variables. So I guess that's part of it. But in the name of science, it's like highly inconvenient for patients. And
Mhm.
if these clinical trials are developed to improve the lives of people with cancer, then they could also think about how it detracts from their quality of life simultaneously.
Sure. Do you know, I don't know if you would know the answer to this question. Do you know if other people in this clinical trial, or is it all local? Is it all done at one facility, or is it all across uh, the US? Or do you have any idea what the kind of outline of this clinical trial is? Any?
What I'm on now is multi-site in the US. The one I was on before this was multi-site worldwide. It
Gotcha.
was a very small enrollment. It was like 4 people per site,
Mm,
and I was the fourth of 4, and it was the only site in the U.S. So very, very small. But the ones I've been on have all varied.
I think some of the things we've talked about are the structure of clinical trials really is a big deal. The schedule flexibility, minimizing in-person visits, um, personal impact on you. There's also, what can be done inpatient versus outpatient, virtual. You think a lot of those things could help clinical trials to not only better their process, but probably even be able to get more people involved because it fits their lifestyles a little better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great information to put out there for clinical trials. And I'm sure that let's hope that talking about some of this stuff really helps and gets more information out there for the people who are um, doing the clinical trials, and that we can help get clinical trials out there for more people. So thank you so much for all of your time and expertise and discussion, and for sharing your journey with us. And that's that. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.